My dad died a few weeks ago. On his deathbed, he told me that my cousin Lauren, the daughter of my father's brother James, is actually my half-sister, as the product of an affair between my dad and Uncle James's wife Alice. I won't go into details to minimize the risk of being identified, but apparently, Uncle James, Aunt Alice, and my dad all knew the truth. My dad wanted to acknowledge Lauren as his child, but my Aunt Alice wanted to keep the affair a secret and raise Lauren as her and Uncle James's child. My dad agreed to what Aunt Alice wanted because he loved her, and initially he was going to let the truth die with him. Uncle James and Aunt Alice passed away a few years ago, but on his deathbed, he had a change of heart. He said that he wanted to finally be able to acknowledge Lauren and leave her with the same inheritance that my siblings and I will get. I was shocked because I always thought my parents had a happy marriage, and I was gutted that my dad cheated on my mom. I didn't say anything after he died because part of me was angry that he cheated. And for all that he talked about finally wanting to be a dad to Lauren, he didn't even have the decency to admit the truth to everyone himself. Instead, he left it to me to deal with everything after he was, conveniently for him, dead. I also didn't want to burden my mom with the grief of knowing that her perfect husband cheated on her and would have left her for his sister-in-law if Aunt Alice hadn't told him that they should stay with their families. The only thing I feel guilty about is that I know Lauren is entitled to inherit from my dad, who left a sizable estate. But it's not like she's being cheated out of money that she desperately needs, because Uncle James and Aunt Alice were well off themselves, and Lauren got almost everything when they died. I've been keeping all of this to myself for the past weeks because I can't tell anyone I know in real life. But I want to know what other people think. Maybe I just need to get this off my chest. Maybe I want validation. But yeah, I want to know what you guys think. Not the a-hole. Your father was a coward. Alice and James have been dead for years. If he wanted a relationship with Lauren, he could have easily reached out. He probably didn't want the fallout with your mom, and now he leaves it up to you to rip out your mother's heart, now that she has no chance to even yell at him. And poor Lauren, all three parents, dead. Also unable to really reconcile any of this with them. Granted, I don't know Lauren. Maybe she wouldn't give a crap. But your mother will certainly be hurt. I am normally all for the exposure of cheating, so that the person being wronged has a chance to act on that knowledge. But in this case, your father is dead. Your mother can't work things out with him. She can't leave him. All she can do is be even more upset than she already is. If Lauren were languishing in poverty, I might feel differently, but it seems she's okay. If I were you, I'd keep some of my inheritance secretly stashed away, in case Lauren ever falls on hard times or something, I guess. Then you could help her out. Not the a-hole. What a crappy thing to confess on your deathbed. Not your responsibility to pursue this. If he wanted to live without regret, he should have had the balls to tell her himself. Not the a-hole. 3 people chose to hide the product of an affair. 2 of them died with this knowledge. Your cousin had been living her entire life with the belief that your uncle was her father. In this case, the best thing to do would be to let this secret go with you. This would cause more damage than good to all the people involved. It was honestly wrong of your father to tell you this on his deathbed and give you the burden of knowing the truth. Ultimately, unless he left behind a will, I wouldn't say anything. I, 16 female, am the youngest of 3 kids from my dad's first marriage. My older siblings are currently 22 female and 24 male. I have 2 stepbrothers who are now 19 and 23, and a half-brother who is 7. When I was 9 and my siblings were 15 and 17, our mom died. She had very advanced ovarian cancer, and Dad sunk almost $100K into her hospital expenses. She spent the last 3 months of her life in a medically induced coma. I don't remember much of this. I just remember coming from school to a cold, empty house. My siblings spent a lot of time with friends, but I had a lisp, so was picked on a lot and didn't have anyone I could stay with. And being hungry because Dad couldn't afford to feed us. A couple of months after Mom died, we all moved into a big McMansion that was owned by my soon-to-be stepmom. Things immediately turned around for me. Alice, my soon-to-be stepmom, was also a widower. Her husband had died in the military while she was pregnant with her youngest son. She had inherited money and had always wanted a daughter. She showered me with gifts, including speech therapy, moving to a better school where I wasn't picked on, etc., etc. She also tried to do the same for my older siblings, and at the time, I didn't understand why they rejected her gifts or yelled at her. I've since found out that she and my dad began an affair in the last few months of my mom's life while she was in a coma. My dad has explained how awful he felt, and how, while he regrets what he did, it was Alice's money that paid for some of my mom's treatment, and her offering him a place to stay stopped us from becoming homeless. However, it's this knowledge that made my siblings dislike her so much. Alice, my dad, my stepbrothers, and my younger half-brother all get along amazingly now, particularly Alice and I. My older siblings left home when they were 16 and 18 and have cut off Dad and Alice, and have limited contact with me. In July, my brother had his first child, a son. I expressed a wish to visit the baby, and I was refused unless I renounced my support of Alice and Dad. I refused. I ended up getting dozens of angry messages from my siblings accusing me of abandoning Mom and being a terrible sister, and I feel awful. Am I the a-hole for refusing to stop loving Alice? Edited to add, since I know people will ask. Dad met Alice at the city food bank around 14 months prior to Mom dying. Mom was going through her second round of chemo, and money was tight, so most of our food was coming from the food bank. As Dad tells it, Alice was handing out food parcels, saw me in the car, and offered Dad one of the limited stuffed animals available. About 8 months later, my dad could no longer afford the medical bills and was asking his friends for help, and she offered him money. Past that point, she paid most of Mom's medical bills. She and Dad are adamant that they didn't become physically involved until after Mom was comatose, and the date of birth for my half-brother corresponds with this. However, my siblings are convinced that she actually pushed Dad to pull the plug on Mom and was asking for money from him, which caused our financial trouble. These are both lies, and I've seen financial statements and other proof to the contrary, but my siblings won't believe me. Not the a-hole. I understand why your siblings are upset. Your dad cheated on your mom while she was dying. Just think about that. Imagine you are dying and in pain while the man you love is sleeping with another woman, instead of being with his kids, or by your side. I would hate her forever too. She may be a great stepmom and great wife, but it will never erase the fact that she stepped over a dying woman to steal her husband. You can forgive her, that is up to you. Your siblings have no obligation to forgive her or accept her and your dad. If I was them, I would probably disown your dad too. And if I was your brother, I would take my wife's last name and have my kids take her last name too, to cut ties with your dad. I, mid to late 40s, female, met my husband 13 years ago. His wife had recently passed away in a car accident where his baby daughter, at the time 1 month old, had also sustained serious injuries. We met while his daughter was still in the hospital, as at the time, my son, then 4, had broken his arm at kindy, and a chance encounter turned into a coffee date. We kept in touch over the next couple of months, and I ended up giving him some excess expressed milk of mine, as I had a ridiculous oversupply and forceful letdown with my second child, at the time 4-month female, which had made her very colicky, so I had been advised to pump prior to feeding so that she wouldn't gulp as much. His daughter was having issues finding a formula that didn't make her sick, and she was too young to start solids. He and I started dating during this period, and he ended up moving into my house after his was broken into. I ended up breastfeeding her from 5 months to 14 months. We did do the recommended checks at the hospital prior to my giving her any expressed milk. Now we have recently adopted a baby girl, 5 months old, together, after being on our local adoption list for almost 4 years. I made the decision to induce lactation so I could breastfeed her. Over the last 6 months or so, our daughters, his and mine, both now 13 years old, have been acting out. Nothing major, just talking back occasionally, pushing boundaries around bedtimes, etc. Typical preteen behavior. My son did the same and had mostly stopped by the time he was 14. We have always done our best to treat the girls the same and not show either any special treatment, with the exception of Anna, his daughter, having an extra set of grandparents, her mother's parents, and a collection of photos from her mom and inheriting her mom's jewelry. My two were via IVF and a sperm donor, although both sets of Anna's biological grandparents have welcomed them with open arms, so they don't really miss out on the grandparent experience. However, when Anna found out I was going to breastfeed the baby, she got upset and said it was disgusting that I was going to breastfeed when she wasn't my baby. I laughed it off and made a joke saying she, Anna, hadn't complained when I breastfed her. She was shocked that I had and called me a rude name and stormed out. She's been cold towards me for almost 2 days now, and normally we get along great. So I'm wondering if I was in the wrong all those years ago. A couple of comments have said my husband moved on very fast, which isn't accurate. I just checked the timeline with him because I wasn't 100% sure on it. It did happen 13 years ago after all. 2006, August. He found out she'd had an affair with a coworker, confronted her. They agreed to try and make it work. 2007, January. She admitted she cheated again at the office Christmas party. They decided to call the relationship quits, but were still living together. March, she moved out and he filed for divorce. April, she found out she was approximately 8 weeks pregnant, had slept with him around the date of conception, but had also been seeing the coworker. They agreed to put the divorce on hold until after the baby was born and a paternity test could be done. Although they continued to live separately, and she later moved in with the coworker while 6 months pregnant, and he was dating someone else during this period. December. Anna was born approximately a week early. Was pretty clear immediately her father was my husband due to skin color, but they did the paternity test at 2 weeks old anyway. He took custody of her after his wife passed in early January and got the results back confirming her paternity in mid-January, around which time we first met in the hospital. 2008, March. Our first proper date was on the 11th. I started giving him expressed milk for Anna about a week later, after her issues with formula put her in the hospital, getting fed through an IV. April. Mid-April he moved in with me because his house was broken into and TV stereo stolen while he and Anna slept upstairs, and he no longer felt safe living there. Around end of April, I started breastfeeding Anna because my letdown had settled, so I no longer was needed to express before every feed for my daughter, and I was sick of cleaning and sterilizing pumping equipment and bottles. Not the a-hole. You're the stepmom to a preteen that's experiencing mood swings and probably trying to challenge her parents as often as she can. She's not an a-hole for going through puberty, and neither are you for breastfeeding her. You're not the a-hole for breastfeeding your stepdaughter, but slight yes the a-hole for telling her about it now when all of the following are true. She expressed discomfort with the idea. She's going through a bratty, immature phase and is unlikely to appreciate what you did for her. You said it as a joke rather than a loving comment, and it probably emphasized for her the timeline of you stepping in and taking over almost immediately after her mother died. I have an adopted sibling named Jane. She was only adopted by my mom and not by my dad, who for some reason didn't want to be Jane's legal parent, although he financially supported her. Jane uses my mom's maiden name for her last name. My brother and I were already in college when Jane was adopted as a baby, so we've never really been close to her. I see her more like a cousin, someone who I know is family but I'm not that close to, and get to see just a couple times a year. She is 19 now, and we get along all right. When my dad died, he willed everything he owned to be split equally among my mom, my brother, and myself. He did not leave anything to Jane. My parents have a prenup where they agreed to keep their assets separate. My dad individually owns most of our family's real estate assets, majority of which are inherited from his family. But my mom also individually owns several real estate assets that she inherited from her family. Following my dad's will, ownership of the real estate assets that he owned were transferred to my mom, my brother, and I, who are equal co-owners. My mom recently approached me and my brother about one of the ancestral houses we inherited. It's a smaller piece of property, but has been in my father's family for at least 7 generations, and my brother and I used to spend our summer vacations there with our grandparents. My mom said that she wanted to work on transferring ownership of her real estate properties to us, her children, even while she's still alive, and wanted me and my brother to waive our co-ownership of the ancestral house so she can give it to Jane. I was a bit irked and asked why my mom wanted to do that. She said she wanted Jane to have one of the properties owned by my dad to remember him by, and she thinks Jane would love that house. My brother and I told her that we're fine with giving Jane one of Dad's more recent properties, but not the ancestral home that has been in his family for decades. My dad, for whatever reason, did not see Jane as family because he refused to adopt her legally. He didn't show her paternal affection as far as I know, and he didn't leave her anything in his will, so I didn't think it was right to let Jane have that house. My girlfriend says that what I said was a-hole-ish because I'm perpetuating my dad's alienation of Jane. I told her that I am not alienating Jane, and I am all for giving her one of my dad's recent properties, just not the ancestral house, because it has sentimental value to my dad and his extended family, and to me and my brother, while Jane never spent any time there. Am I the a-hole? Edit. Since so many people are asking, I'm 100% sure that Jane is not my mom's bio daughter from an affair or whatever. Jane was privately adopted, and as far as I know, she is the bio child of someone distantly related to my mom's relatives. She was given to them as a baby, and the one of her relatives asked my mom if she wanted to have Jane. I guess my mom wanted to have a daughter, so she said yes. My dad has always been aloof, and he wasn't affectionate even to us, his bio children, when we were growing up. So I'm not surprised that he didn't want to be a parent to someone who isn't his bio child. Not the a-hole. Your mom is off here. I don't see why she has or wants to give away a home that you and your brother have an actual connection with, to someone who has no connection to it whatsoever. You're being kind in offering her any of the other properties. Let me get this straight. You have sentimental attachment to a property in question, yes? You are okay giving Jane a non-ancestral property instead. What is your mother's objection to giving Jane a different property? Why does she want to give her that one? Is it more convenient for Jane? I think not the a-hole, OP. You've not grown up with that person as a sibling. She has not spent time at that property like you have. The thing is with giving someone something is that you have no control over it anymore. So if Jane turns around and sells that property tomorrow, you have no say over it, and just like that, your ancestral property could belong to someone else. Of course, your brother or you could also do the same. You're not alienating her. You're giving her property, just not the one your mom had in mind. Make sure, though, that Jane is given something equal in value.